Bills Mafia tonight on the Air Raid Hour. We have so much to talk about. The Kansas City Chiefs fall to the Philadelphia Eagles in embarrassing fashion. We get to revel in that for a little bit. Josh Allen wins MVP. The Buffalo Bills add some new coaches to the coaching staff. What could that mean about possible scheme changes? And we look ahead to the 2025 free agent class. All that and more. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. Got a new look here for the offseason, so hopefully you can dig that. Thanks to you, Dave, for putting this new interface together for us here at the Air Raid Hour. But my name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at the Bills Guys. Joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. We are brought to you by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. And Dave, as I sort of previewed in the intro, the Kansas City Chiefs absolutely got beat down by the Philadelphia Eagles last night. And I told myself, like, I was at the in-laws, I'm like, I'm not going to get too into the game. I'm just going to play with my daughter. I'm just going to hang out in the back, eat some snacks, let everyone else sort of enjoy the game. I'm just going to glance over every once in a while. But I'll tell you what, the beatdown that the Philadelphia Eagles put on the Kansas City Chiefs had my attention throughout most of the game. What a dominating performance from the Eagles.
Dominating performance. Thought it could be a little touchy there in the beginning with that offensive pass interference call against A.J. Brown on the very first drive of the game, fourth down for the Eagles. But that Eagles defense really ended up being the story of the game. And the Chiefs not scoring until late into the third quarter, which was pretty incredible if you think about it. And yeah, the end score 40-22, but it really wasn't even that close at the end of the day. And, some inflated stats for some of the Chiefs players, of course, at the end there. But the Eagles defense, really, to me, the story of that game, and really something that we're going to maybe try to draw some parallels to and kind of what the Bills could be looking to do this offseason. But look, I think for Bills fans reacting to this game, some people maybe didn't watch the game. I see RJ, didn't watch it last night, but turned on and watch it today. A little bit of, solace, so to speak, at the end of the season. Obviously, we wanted the Bills to be in this game, having a chance to win the Super Bowl. But to see the Chiefs lose, I think, was somewhat cathartic for a lot of Bills fans to see that. Yeah. And look, I think that it did prove to a lot of people, or at least didn't squash the narrative, that the Chiefs really were somewhat of a paper tiger this year, winning all these close games. And at the end of the day, they just had no answer for this Eagles defense.
Yeah, Pops Mafia comes in and says, do you think the Bills would have done better than the Chiefs? I 100% think the Buffalo Bills would have done better than the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, would they have won? I don't know. But when you look at the way the Philadelphia Eagles defense is constructed, they like to get pressure with four, play that two deep shell, and drop everyone back into zone coverage. And the Kansas City Chiefs, they haven't had a running game for like half a season now. I mean, they're trotting Kareem Hunt out there for some reason. I don't know if it's because of injury or what. Like Isaiah Pacheco just isn't right. That team has not tried to run the football really the whole back half of the year, and it came back to bite them. They came out pass. The Eagles were getting pressure on Patrick Mahomes all day. Then the Eagles got a lead, and then the Chiefs had to pass some more, and it just completely spiraled out of control. They played right into the hands of what the Philadelphia Eagles want opposing teams to do. The Buffalo Bills, I think, could have established a running game against that Philadelphia front. Would it have been perfect? No. But I think that it would have been a heck of a lot better than what the Kansas City Chiefs could have and did sort of, put out in the run game. And the Buffalo Bills definitely could have kept that score way, 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 way closer than the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think that that was also one of the stories of the game early on was the Chiefs were really not
Mhm,
committed to running the ball early in the game. Not a lot of creativity, I guess you would say, from the Chiefs play calling in the early goings. And you never know really what the reasons were, like how these guys were feeling before the game, but it certainly felt to me and gave off the vibe to me that it that Chiefs team felt like maybe they were just going to walk in there and win that game and not really have to do much, and that clearly wasn't the case. Like the energy levels were clearly not the same between the Chiefs and the Eagles. The Eagles had way more energy than
mhm,
anyone on the Chiefs did, and that was evident from the get-go that the Eagles just were way more prepared. It seemed like they were way more intense and into the game. And um, on the flip side, they did stick with their running game, even though early on Saquon Barkley wasn't really getting a ton of traction. The volume numbers and the efficiency numbers weren't necessarily there for Saquon, but did have 25-ish, I think it was 25 carries, if I'm not mistaken, and really contributed in the passing game. So they kind of stuck with it on the ground, the Philadelphia Eagles did. And Jalen Hurts using his legs, something that Patrick Mahomes really hurt the Bills doing in that game, in the AFC Championship game. Mahomes really killed the Bills at different times with his legs rolling out to the right and whatnot. But you didn't see that from him either in this game, whereas on the flip side, you did see Jalen Hurts doing that. So really everything
mhm.
worked well for the Eagles in this one.
I want to stay on the Super Bowl here, but I want to shift gears towards the Buffalo Bills because obviously this is a Buffalo Bills podcast. This is not a Eagles Chiefs podcast. And I want to talk about maybe some of the things that we took away from this game that were
Mhm.
Buffalo Bills specific. Because I know as I watched this game, it was a cathartic watch for me, of course, watching Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce get their butts kicked. But at the same time, it was kind of an infuriating game for me to watch too, knowing sort of some of the shortcomings the Buffalo Bills had this year and what they needed to do in order to get themselves to be in that situation. And the first thing that really stuck out to me watching this game is that there's this large crowd of people who say, like, hey, AFC Championship game, Josh Allen had the ball with 2 minutes left and a chance to win. The defense did enough. You got to stop blaming the defense. The offense plays a role too. And of course, there's context to everything and there's layers to everything. But if you're someone who doesn't believe that the defense is almost 95% to me to blame for all the issues that the Buffalo Bills had this season, I'm sorry, but you're just wrong. Like if the Buffalo Bills defense had a pulse, they were playing in that game yesterday against the Philadelphia Eagles. The offense was historic this year. They were clearly more than good enough this year to get the Buffalo Bills to be playing in that game yesterday. It was the defense that let the Buffalo Bills down in 2025, or excuse me, in 2024, and that needs to get course corrected for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, it really does need to get course corrected. And I think that, look, I mean, in the press conferences, Brandon Beane always mentions about, yes, you need to win your division first. And they're kind of, that's their priority. And I guess when it comes to building a roster, like you want to make sure you're putting yourself in a position to win the division. And I get that, but it really shouldn't be that much different as far as like putting a team together that can beat the Kansas City
Mhm.
Chiefs or beat the Baltimore Ravens or potentially a team like the Cincinnati Bengals in the future, et cetera. Like the formula should be pretty similar to beating the elite teams of the AFC. That should do enough and be enough to win your own division and
Mhm.
not the reverse, right? Like you're not playing for the ceiling of winning the division when you're going out and building the roster. You're going out and building the roster to beat any and all teams in the NFL, including winning the Super Bowl. So I agree with you on that. I do think that there definitely is like it is somewhat easy to kind of get sucked into this sort of single game sort of outcome here because we did see prior that Eagles team struggle a bit against the Rams even in the snow. The Rams were coming back to potentially come back and make a game of that. So it's again still a week to week situation, but you have to be able to see what this Eagles team did to the Chiefs. You have to go back and look at the 2020 season, the Super Bowl that was played in the beginning of 2021 to see what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, able to get to Patrick Mahomes 3 times in that game with guys like Ndamukong Suh on their defensive line, and not help but think that the Bills may need a philosophy shift, especially across the defensive line. Now, I will say this, that the Eagles didn't blitz all game. That was one of the advanced metrics in this game. But that secondary for the Eagles also deserves a lot of credit as well. We really focused on that defensive line, and rightfully so. They were the catalyst for all of that. But those secondary players for the Eagles also deserve some credit.
Charles G comes in and says, Bills don't have anywhere near the talent of the Philadelphia Eagles on defense. And that is true. But there's a difference between like having that level of talent and just being capable. I mean, Patrick Mahomes had the highest drop back success rate of his career, of his entire career, against the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game. And then he followed it up 2 weeks later, looking like a lost puppy and having arguably the worst game of his career. At one point, he did have the worst drop back success rate of his career over the course of that football game. That might have evaporated and changed as the game completed. I'm not sure. He was stat padding a lot in the fourth quarter to Xavier Worthy there to make it a little less embarrassing for himself and the Chiefs. But there's got to be some middle ground between Patrick Mahomes has the most efficient game of his career against you in the AFC Championship game, and Patrick Mahomes has the worst game of his career against the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. There's got to be somewhere in the middle where the Buffalo Bills can find, because even if they just do that, their offense was good enough to be in that game yesterday.
Yeah, and it seems like, as RJ's saying in the comment section, every time the Chiefs seem to play the Bills in the playoffs, it's like their best game of every single year. And I 100% agree with his comment here. I mean, that does seem to be the case, and there has to be a middle ground. I agree with you. And I even mentioned in the comment section, like, the Bills did a good job in the regular season matchup and getting pressure on Mahomes with 4. I mean, we saw him through that early interception to Taylor Rapp. We saw him throw the interception at the end of the game to Terrell Bernard. Dorian Williams was doing some nice things. Like, they did a good job in that first regular season game, but for whatever reason, the contain, the rush, the ability to keep Patrick Mahomes from running in that AFC Championship game just disappeared. So while there's some middle ground between what happened in the AFC Championship game and the Super Bowl, I also think there's some middle ground between what we saw from the Bills defense in that game versus comparing the Bills defense to itself in the regular season. I do think they relied a lot on turnovers, and they did get the one, obviously, in the championship game, but too reliant maybe on the turnovers. And also, we knew they weren't great in some of the other advanced metrics. Not a ton of sacks, bottom half. They were bottom 5 team in third down defense. So there was a lot of one of the highest yards per attempt allowed against the run. Like, there was some glaringly bad weaknesses to this Bills defense as well. And some of this, I do also agree with Ralph Wilson Sr. here, the killer attitude. Eagles played fast and violent. The swagger, the attitude, the intensity, I think that was lacking at times as well.
You have Joe Thuney, who's an all-pro left guard, playing left tackle, and they had a UDFA at left guard. And this has been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it was a recipe for disaster for the Kansas City Chiefs, but it was somehow working because no one up until the Philadelphia Eagles were able to exploit that. I mean, come on. Vic Fangio and the Eagles personnel managed to do something that Bobby Babich and Gregory Rousseau and Von Miller could not. And that was to exploit Joe Thuney to their advantage and utilize that. So that's something that they should explore, because as Ralph said, where's that killer attitude? Where's that killer instinct? Where is seeing where your opponent is severely lacking and attacking it? Because I did not see that from the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game. And the second thing that I sort of, came back to over the course of this game, and this is something we've had a conversation about for years and years and years on this show, and we always seem to have it for a couple of weeks, and we're super excited, and then it goes away. And that is the goal for every team, I think, in football. This is not just the Buffalo Bills. This is any of the 31 teams. The goal for every team in football should be able to build a defense that can pressure with 4 and drop 7 into coverage. It's an absolute cheat code. I mean, the Eagles, you mentioned it earlier, did not blitz Patrick Mahomes one time last night. And we always get excited because for like 2 to 3 weeks a season, 3 to 4 weeks a season, the Buffalo Bills seem to be one of the best in football at doing it. I remember after that Rams opener a couple of years ago when the Bills absolutely went off on Matthew Stafford and dropped 7 into coverage all night. We were sitting here like, we have Von Miller. Jordan Phillips is like our third defensive tackle. He's popping off on, like, we were like, this is insane. This is something we've never had before. We can just drop 7 guys into coverage and pressure with 4. This defense is going to be out of this world. And then like 3 weeks later, it just fades away. And every couple of years, it pops up for a couple of weeks and then it fades away. When is this Buffalo Bills team, this front office, this coaching staff, when are they going to learn that they need to add more power players along their front 7? They need guys who can go out there and win their one-on-ones. They do not have that. I think Gregory Rousseau is a very good football player. I think Ed Oliver is a very good football player. I think at times they can go out there and they can really impact a football game. But it almost seems like year in and year out, time and time again, what you see with Gregory Rousseau and what you see with Ed Oliver is they are seemingly guys whose biggest impact comes from feeding off of other people more so than other people feeding off of them. They're not the catalyst. They're like they're like the having your cake and eating it too type of guys, because Ed Oliver is always at his best when Daquan Jones is eating up space, right? Gregory Rousseau is always at his best when Von Miller was pre-ACL on the other side of him. So to me, I love Rousseau. I love, Ed Oliver, but they're just they're never the catalyst. They always seem to be just feeding off of other guys.
Yeah, and I mean, you, me, Casey Reed, we were talking about this earlier, just said in the comments section, the Bills have a lot of good players on defense. I don't know that they have any one truly great player on defense right now. I think formerly, a couple years ago, that would have been Matt Milano. I think maybe Christian Benford is the closest thing you have to an elite level player on the defense. At times, it's Ed Oliver, but it's not into that quite upper tier yet. And so while they have a lot of good players, that can break down at times, right? When you get into these high leverage, high pressure situations. And at times it can look really good when things are working well. And at other times it kind of falls a little flat. And so, look, I agree with what Pete Nana is saying in the comments section, right? It's not that the Bills haven't tried on the defensive line. It's just that their hit rate has not been good. And that's exactly right? Like, they have swung at defensive linemen, whether it's through free agency or the draft, with guys like Rousseau and Epinesa, or trying to sign Von Miller, right? Or giving Daquan Jones the extension, right? Or things of that nature. But like, when you then turn around, and it's probably an unfair comparison, and look at what successes a team like the Eagles have had in the draft and in free agency, it's an almost flawless hit rate from Howie Roseman with that defensive line. And so I don't know that you're going to get to that, and it's probably unrealistic to expect that, but you need to have a slightly better hit rate here if you're Brandon Beane and kind of constructing this defensive line. And unfortunately, that's been the one area where every year we kind of go into the season thinking like, oh, this team, they've retooled the defensive line. This is the time where they finally got it right. And the funny thing is at times it does look like they got it right. Like, think about last year before, or the year when Von Miller gets hurt. Like, you had Leonard Floyd in the wings. You had a rotation of Leonard Floyd, Von Miller, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa. I mean, that was looking to be a prime unit, and then Von Miller gets hurt. You're fortunate you have Leonard Floyd, but then he's an older veteran, so he kind of fizzles out at the end of the year, and things kind of go the way they go. So the hit rate needs to improve. Most times, as we've seen, guys like Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, these guys aren't available. They're maybe available through a trade, but most times the way you're going to get these guys are through the draft. And so that's where, if you're hoping to hit a home run, you need to kind of hit one if you don't make a trade.
Yeah, Walter S. comes in here and says, I'm over the entire defensive philosophy scheme of the Bills. After all these years, what have we seen to even give McD the benefit of the doubt that his preferred defensive scheme works? Well, the fact that his defensive scheme is pretty much the same defensive scheme the Philadelphia Eagles run. He likes to try to pressure with 4. He doesn't like to blitz. He likes to drop guys back into zone coverage. What the Philadelphia Eagles did is what Sean McDermott would prefer to do. The issue is the Buffalo Bills don't have the dogs to do it. Like, you need dogs to do that. And the Buffalo Bills just have not had that on defense for, I would say, since Von Miller tore his ACL in Detroit. Since then, the Buffalo Bills just have not had the dogs to go out there and run that defense since Hayden Poyer got a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, to me, these past few weeks have been kind of an indictment on Brandon Beane a little bit. I mean, yes, it's playing the hindsight game, but yes, we as fans get to play the hindsight game. It's just, it is what it is. It might not be fair to Brandon Beane, but that's life. He has consistently built a team that gets the Buffalo Bills to the AFC divisional round, to the AFC conference championship game, but he hasn't been able to make those 1 or 2 moves that get the Buffalo Bills over the top. And to that extent, he has failed Josh Allen a little bit, because the last 2 years, if his defense just had a pulse, the Buffalo Bills are probably playing on Super Bowl Sunday. Now, I'm willing to give him a pass 2 years ago because the injuries were just absolutely obscene. But this year we were kind of getting healthier than we had ever been the last couple of weeks of the season, and just the roster wasn't there. And some people can say, well, it's a rebuild year, it's a retool year. Like, we were all this dead money on the cap. Well, we have all that dead money on the cap because of some of the other decisions he had made as well. So again, it all just sort of culminates. And I'm not going to sit here and say, like, we need to reconsider who the general manager of the Buffalo, but no, I'm not. There are some people who, like, in the comment section on social media, when I made some of the comments I made about roster construction the last couple of days, are like, well, Beane sucks. No, he does not, right? He's a very good NFL general manager. I'm not saying we need to make a move or anything like that, but it is infuriating to me seeing some of the decisions the Bills have made, especially in comparison to some of the decisions that some of these other winning football teams have made. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell was drafted in the mid-20s, steps onto the football field as a first rounder, and he excelled. When we're now in year 3 of Karier Elam, he's a backup. We have absolutely killed his confidence as an organization, and he's probably going to be traded. You know, you have Cooper DeJean making a huge impact in the Eagles secondary, pick 6 in the Super Bowl, while Cole Bishop looks lost or clearly not comfortable to the extent to be a difference maker when he's on the field his rookie year. And maybe he will be next year, but why is their guy getting there so much quicker than our guy is getting there in terms of getting it? It took Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams 2 years to step onto the football field and make an impact. Took AJ Epinesa 3 years, but the Chiefs were able to field a Super Bowl winning defense 2 years ago on the backs of, like, an entire rookie class. Like, again, as a fan, that's infuriating. And I'll be patient and I'll see how some of these guys play out. You know, Cole Bishop, Dwayne Carter, who couldn't even get onto the field against, you know, guys the Buffalo Bills were picking up off the streets. Like, I'll be patient, but it's also looking more and more like Xavier Worthy has that game-changing type of speed that defensive coordinators need to plan for. And Keon Coleman is a guy whose production can be replicated by Mac Hollins. Like, Coleman, Bishop, Carter, they could all be game changers next year. Again, patience. But where was it this year? Where was their impact this year? The top 3 picks in the draft for the Buffalo Bills had practically no impact for the Buffalo Bills in the postseason, and a very minimal impact in the regular season. Why couldn't Cole Bishop beat out DeMar Hamlin? Why couldn't Keon Coleman get more involved? Why were there street free agents beating out Dwayne Carter on a weekly basis? I think they can all be good pros, and I think they can all be good picks. But why the hell does it take so long in Buffalo when rookies are contributing everywhere else at a far significant pace?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? And I think part of this is that Brandon Beane obviously is revered. I think in the views of most fans, I think people regard Brandon Beane a little bit higher than they do Sean McDermott, and I think that's a little bit unfair, just because obviously McDermott's the one on the field when these games are played and the wins and losses come about. But at the end of the day, Brandon Beane's going to ultimately be viewed as the guy that drafted Josh Allen, and that's going to mask and cover up a lot of the things that he hasn't done well. And like you said, he is a very good NFL GM, but I think he thrives more in sort of the middle, like the middle tier type of moves. Like he's done extremely well in sort of in sort of bringing in contributing free agents. The middle and later round draft picks at times have looked good. Obviously, Christian Benford highlights that group. Guys like Dawson Knox have contributed. Terrell Bernard as a third rounder. But when it comes to the meat of the batting order, right, the 3 through 5 hitters, like those guys, and I mean by that is your first and second round picks, really haven't been the ones to contribute. And people can say, well, Christian Benford makes up for the fact that Kyrie Elam was a bust. And I'm going to say, like, no, it really
Because we could have
doesn't.
two of them. We could have two of them.
Like, that's great and all, but like, to me, the later round guys, there's a little bit more luck involved, whether those guys pan out or not. There shouldn't be as much luck involved with whether the early round guys pan out or not. And there's still plenty of early round guys that don't all across the league. It's not just the Bills. So don't get me wrong on that. But like we have missed on a lot of early round picks. And not that they've been bad players, but they just haven't been like the game changing sort of like elite tier type of player that you hope to get at least once every couple years when you draft in the first and second round. So look, I'm not trying to like make this an indictment on Brandon Beane either, but there does need to be a little bit of reflection here to acknowledge, and people have to, I think, acknowledge that yes, injuries were a factor with guys like Dwayne Carter and Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman for that matter, and I get that.
And Cole Bishop.
And Cole Bishop in training camp. So let's see. Yes, patience is important, but we've also have been patient with other guys that haven't necessarily lived up to expectations too. So I'm just saying, no GM bats 1,000. Brandon Beane is still a very good GM, but there needs to be more impactful players added to this defense.
And Chris Trapasso shared a statistic this morning. Not even a statistic. He just shared a piece of information this morning that I found super intriguing. And it has me thinking that Brandon Beane has to start rethinking his approach to the draft a little bit. Howie Roseman, the last 4 drafts, among the 12 players he's taken in the first 3 rounds, 7 of them have been offensive or defensive linemen. That accounts for 58% of his day 1 and 2 picks have gone to the trenches. 9 of Brandon Beane's 20 first and third round picks in his tenure have been used in the trenches. That just makes up 45%. And in his time here in Buffalo since 2017, the year Josh Allen was drafted, in that time, he has used 2 first round picks two day 1 and 2 picks on tight ends, 3 on running backs, and 2 on linebackers. That makes up 35% of his first, second, and third round draft picks, tight ends, linebackers, and running backs. That is not good asset allocation, in my opinion. In isolation, could they all be good football players? Yes, but that's just not good asset allocation, especially the running backs. James Cook is the only one who was worth it at the end of the day. What you got from Devin Singletary for 4 years, you could have gotten from a guy in the 7th round. Zach Moss was an absolute bust with what he contributed here for us. We wasted those picks. We wasted them on running backs, guys that you can literally pick up in the 4th round like we saw with Ray Davis, right? James Cook, cool. If you do it, you better get it right. And he got it right with James Cook. But even that took a while too. It took a couple of years for the Buffalo Bills to fully trust him. So to me, the asset allocation in the first 3 rounds of the draft needs to get better.
Yep. And this is a big one, right? Because now you have a first rounder and 2 second rounders coming up. So
look, and this draft gets criticized a ton. It was the COVID draft, and it gets criticized a ton because of Boogie Basham over Creed Humphrey. But we're still talking trenches there, right? Defensive lineman versus center. But in that draft, he took Gregory Rousseau, Boogie Basham, and Spencer Brown. One of them didn't pan out. Okay. But 2 of them did. You have a guy who I think should have been an all-pro right tackle this year, and a defensive end who might be earning $20 million in his next contract, who, even if he's not a home run type of player, he's still a solid double triple, right? Like those are 2 awesome trench pieces that you added because you went out and you addressed the trenches in that draft. And even though one was a screw up, 2 of them were hits. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, you gotta, in my opinion, allocate more assets to the trenches. And we're going to talk about that a ton over the course of the next couple of months, because unless the Buffalo Bills go and take a big swing for a Myles Garrett or a Trey Hendrickson or a Max Crosby or a Micah Parsons, they sure as heck better be spending 2 of their first 3 picks on defensive linemen. It would be unacceptable without a crazy trade for them not to use 2 of their first 3 picks on the defensive line.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, 2 defensive linemen in a corner probably, right? I mean, that's kind of where I'm leaning right now. So, lot to see what happens. Trade, free agency's a little weak. We're going to get to that a little bit later in the show. But yeah, I think it was just a little bit of jealousy, I think, watching that Eagles defense, and as everyone should be. That was the best defense in the league this year. So
and
yeah,
you see where they drafted some of these guys like Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and some of these other guys that contributed. Who knows? Again, maybe Dwayne Carter has like a Terrell Bernard type of jump in year 2. Maybe Javon Solomon makes a huge leap in year 2, and these middle rounders that we aren't thinking too highly of right now end up being highly impactful players for the Buffalo Bills. And all this blustering that we're doing here is for naught. We're going to talk about something a little bit more cheerful in a second. That's Josh Allen's MVP. But first, a quick word from our sponsor.
What's up, y'all? Khalil Shakir here. When I want Buffalo pizza, it's got to be Picasso's.
Khalil Shakir. Your team, our pizza. Picasso's. This is Buffalo Pizza.
This episode is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza, with 4 convenient locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Picasso's Pizza has been serving Buffalo's best pizza since 1980. Whether you're a local or across the country, you can enjoy their delicious pizza delivered fresh to your door. Visit picassospizza.net to place your order today. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, let's rewind the clock a little bit to Thursday night, when I think, I don't know about you, but I think most people had given up hope. They thought it was going to be Lamar Jackson named MVP of the National Football League. Then Thursday morning, Josh Allen becomes an overwhelming favorite on Poly Market. He shows up to the NFL Honors, a show that he has regularly skipped, to go play golf over the course of the offseason with his fiance, Haley Steinfeld, with his parents, with an entire Buffalo Bills contingent, including Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, Terry Pagula. And the people started to chatter like, oh, okay, like this could happen. And sure enough, later that night, he is announced the winner, highest EPA per play of any player in the National Football League this season. He would have far surpassed all of Lamar's statistics had he not sat 11 quarters this season, because his football team played so well compared to Lamar's. Had probably the best game of any player in the league this season, given the circumstances, against Kansas City. They were down in distance all night. He was converting third downs. He ran for that game-winning touchdown. Box score-wise, is it the most eye-popping statistics of the season? No. Like, Jamar Chase had like a 300-yard game. Like, there were absolutely nutso performances this year. But in terms of the context of that game, the importance of that position, and everything involved, that was probably the singular most impressive performance of any player in the National Football League this season. He's the only QB this season to beat the Chiefs starters and one of 2 teams to beat best the Lions. Not only that, he was phenomenal in both of those games. He had so many iconic moments, from the lateral against San Francisco in the snow, to the Kansas City touchdown run, to the 3 touchdowns passing, 3 touchdowns rushing against the LA Rams, followed up a week later by doing it again versus the Detroit Lions, or doing something very similar. A truly deserving NFL MVP that only someone with complete bias and jealousy would question.
Deserving, and, rewind all the way back to week 1, the hurdle play against the Arizona Cardinals to get the Bills sort of on track in that game as well. Look, I think like what I would say about the MVP award is, look, Lamar Jackson had a fantastic season. Josh Allen had a fantastic season. There were seasons in the past where Josh Allen probably felt like he could have or maybe should have won the MVP. That first time that first season the Bills went to the AFC Championship game, that 2020 season when they played the Chiefs in that one, when Aaron Rodgers won the MVP. I mean, that was an incredible season in 2020 for Josh Allen. Obviously, 2023, we know about how Lamar won the MVP, likely because Josh Allen had all those turnovers and his team was 11 and ended up being 11-6, but still at the end of the day was the 2 seed as well in that one. And the thing is that you can't really sit here and tell me that he wasn't deserving when you put his numbers and his impact that he made up against Lamar. Like, we're not talking about a guy who had 20 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. This guy had 40 plus touchdowns again. He only had 6 or 8, 6 or 8 turnovers on the entire season. His lowest of his career since he's been starting. And this team was the 2 seed, knocked off both the 1 seeds during the regular season, had memorable moments. And again, this team was picked to finish second at best by the odds makers at the beginning of the season in the division. No Stephon Diggs, rookie Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir being their best receiving option. The Bills had to go out and get Amari Cooper, who made an impact, but not a huge impact. And Dalton Kincaid injured for many games as well. So it's hard to not say that it's hard to say that he doesn't deserve it. If you want to say Lamar, like, whatever, right? But like, Josh Allen won it, and that's ultimately great for Bills fans and great for us to see him finally break through after several years of feeling like he had a claim to it. It is nice to see him finally get it.
And it's just crazy to me, right? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's the crux of the issue. If Lamar had won, I don't think any of the people who supported, at least from the national media perspective, or even the local media, right? Like local radio hosts, local beat guys, local personalities, whatever. Like, if Josh Allen had come in second place to Lamar Jackson, have been like, yeah, Lamar had all those box scores. It's whatever. It's the fact that Josh won, deservedly so. You cannot say he didn't deserve that award. He deserved
Right.
it, right?
Yep.
And all of these people, from the national media to the Baltimore media to Baltimore Ravens fans, like, plastering the internet with the DEI award winner and having to sort of tear Josh Allen down and saying it's some kind of disgrace and having to come to Lamar's defense like he was slighted in some sort of way, in some awful way. Like, it's just absolutely crazy to me. Like, and I don't understand it, especially given last year of all years when Lamar was handed that award. And I guess I'm kind of going against what I just said, but like, let's be real here. Lamar's 2023 MVP was a participation award. Like, he was the quarterback of one of the better teams in the AFC, and he had a couple of big games late in the year. He was not the NFL MVP in 2023. And I'm not even saying Josh Allen was. McCaffrey, I would have given it to Tyreek Hill. Like, there's so many other people I would have given that award to before I would have given it to Josh Allen. I'm not even saying it should have been Josh Allen's, but like, all these people who are saying like, how dare you slight Lamar? Look at his stats, neglecting the fact that Josh Allen played 11 less quarters. How dare you, like, and say this is a narrative award. It's a statistical award. When last year you did not have that same energy, when Lamar Jackson was almost unanimous, if not for Aaron Schatz, to be the NFL MVP. And Stephen A. Smith went on national TV and said Aaron Schatz was a disgrace for voting against him and not making him a unanimous MVP when he literally had Tyrod Taylor in 2019 as numbers. It was embarrassing that he won the NFL MVP last year.
I mean, last year, I would have had Dak Prescott, Christian McCaffrey, and Tyreek Hill all over Lamar Jackson as an MVP candidate. I would have had Lamar and Josh probably in that next group. I probably wouldn't have even had Josh Allen as the MVP last year. But the fact of the matter is that Lamar Jackson won it last year, and the award had become a narrative QB award, right? We hadn't had an NFL MVP that was not a quarterback since AP came back from his ACL and ran for 2,000 yards for the Minnesota Vikings back in whatever it was, 2012 or whatever season that was, right? And so this has essentially become a QB with the best stats on the best team award. And last year, the narrative became a little bit more of the best team, and the team's success mattered more than the statistics is how they awarded the award last year. So if you're going to stick to that sort of approach, okay, then Josh Allen definitely deserved the award this year if it's really more of a narrative-based award around expectations going into the season, surrounding cast, signature moments, how did he perform against the best teams in the league over the course of the season? And by the way, the team was the 2 seed in the AFC. So all of those things combined, he certainly had a claim to it. They were a higher seed than the Ravens. They had more wins. He had more signature moments, I would say, against better competition, Detroit Lions, Kansas City Chiefs. And at the end of the day, he was deserving of it. And like I said, I'm not trying to take anything away from Lamar because I actually like Lamar. And I think if you had reversed the years in which these awards were won and you had Josh had won it last year, let's say, even though I don't think he probably should have won it last year, and Lamar won it this year, you probably wouldn't have the outrage.
And like, that's the thing to me is, and I didn't mean to be too harsh on Lamar's 2023 MVP. It's not his fault that people voted for him. I thought they were wrong, and I thought it was embarrassing, but they did. But like, all the people who voted for Lamar last year, all that reasoning for why Lamar was the 2023 MVP is the reasoning for why Josh Allen is the 2024 MVP. And Josh Allen's statistics blew that 2023 statistics of Lamar absolutely out of the water. But everything, all the criteria that went into making Lamar the 2023 MVP that fit the bill for Josh Allen to like 100th degree higher because the statistics are better, now all need to be thrown out the window, like for some other completely different category. Like, it made no sense. People were being absolutely hypocritical. You have Dan Orlovsky trying to explain his reasoning on ESPN, and Dominique Foxworth and Jeff Saturday are mimicking, puking noises because they don't actually have an argument of their own to make, because they just like, it's, the whole thing is just infuriating.
Yeah, it is. And I think I'm just glad he won because obviously Bills fans and even Josh Allen himself, I'm sure like we wanted to win the Super Bowl, right? That at the end of the day, that's what we wanted. But you got to look at some of the silver linings, sort of how the last sort of week or so played out and realize, okay, Josh Allen won that award, deserved it. It's great for the team. It's great for the organization to have their first MVP since Thurman, first ever quarterback MVP for the franchise is important, is significant. They beat the Ravens in the playoffs, his direct competition. I know this was voted on before the playoffs, so it doesn't really matter, but they beat the Ravens in the playoffs. They beat Lamar in the playoffs, and then the Chiefs losing the Super Bowl. So there are some things you can look at. A bit of it is kind of taking pleasure in others' misery, but at the end of the day, like only one team wins the Super Bowl and only one person wins the MVP. So I'm happy for him.
Yeah, and it was just an awesome night on social media to share all the fun memes and to share the videos and to see Josh's speech and the way, like, he didn't even make it about him. He made it about his teammates, and Deion Dawkins was up there to help present him the award. And you saw how emotional his parents got. After the ceremony, you had the Oshai children on the iPad congratulating Josh Allen, and Josh Allen getting super emotional. So just an all around just awesome moment for Bills Mafia. Yeah, it was a tough season. It ended in a tough way, but to see Josh win that award, that was super cool just from a fan perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, can we like to talk sometimes conspiracy theories on this show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we do at times. Lamar not being at the awards, the betting favorite, by the way, it wasn't just Polymarket that day of. The books closed, FanDuel, DraftKings, etc. When they closed after week 18 for the MVP, Josh Allen was still the favorite to win.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wonder if there was maybe a little bit of a tip to knowing that he was going to win.
I think Josh Allen knew before he got there that he was the MVP.
Yes,
I don't think Josh Allen's there if he doesn't win it. I think Lamar wasn't there for a reason. I think Terry Pagula, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott were there for a reason. Josh's parents were there for a reason. Like, I think they knew, and I think the Buffalo Bills PR team knew, and they had all of that stuff prearranged and ready to go. I don't think they made those just in case. I think they made those knowing that he was the MVP. So, and then when the market shifted that night, I think it was all a pretty good indicator that he had won. All right, some other things to touch on before we leave here this evening. There were some new coaching hires and fires for the Buffalo Bills. Do we want to start with the hires or the fires, Dave? What are we going to start with here?
Fires. Why
Let's
not?
start with the fires.
We've been waiting for so long for some of this.
The Buffalo Bills reversed course despite Sean McDermott saying that he was staying on and that he would learn from his mistakes. After an internal evaluation, the Buffalo Bills made the decision to part ways with special teams coordinator Matthew Smiley. It was long overdue, a year overdue. We were calling for it last year. It was long overdue in the course that it should have happened the day after the season was over. Sean McDermott never should have came out there and said his job was safe, but he did. But the Buffalo Bills eventually made the right decision. Buffalo Bills are now in the hunt for a new special teams coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, Sean McDermott probably pressed at that specific juncture immediately after the season's ending is not going to come out and say they're going to make any changes at that point in time. I'm sure there was a bit of a few day powwow between him and Bean, and the decision was made like, look, we need to improve in this area. And this is one of those things where if you're the Bills, it's like, these are things you can do to make incremental improvements that will translate onto the field for a team that's already very good, right? So this was a glaring one and certainly made sense. And I think some of the coverage units at times and things of that were really suspect. And look, I don't know how much or how little credit he really should get for, Tyler Bass's turnaround. I think that's 99% on Tyler Bass after he made that kick against Miami. And Sam Martin had a good year punting, but at the end of the day, the special teams from the non-kicking standpoint was not great this year. And there are a couple good coaches available now. So I think maybe that also kind of sparked it a bit.
Yeah, I went out looking for possible replacements, and there were two names that really stuck out to me. The number one is Ben Kawika, the former special teams coordinator of the Denver Broncos. I mean, the Denver Broncos, they had one major blemish this year on special teams, and that was obviously the blocked field goal that cost them the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. But they were fourth in special teams DVOA. And Ben Kawika was literally just fired because Sean Payton does what Sean Payton does, and fired him so we can go hire his friend Darren Rizzi, who coached with him for all those years in New Orleans, who became available once his interim tag was removed there. So a guy who had a top 5 special teams unit, a guy who inherited a pretty bad special teams unit 2 years ago in Denver and got them into the top 5, had an all-pro punt returner in Marvin Mims, is sitting there on the streets in Ben Kawika. That's number one. Number two, you have Chris Tabor out there on the streets as well, former Panther special teams coordinator. He was the interim head coach after Frank Reich was fired last season. He was out of football in 2024, 10 plus years of special teams coordinating experience over the course of 3 different franchises. And in 2023, the NFLPA, through a player survey, ranked him as the number 2 special teams coordinator in all of football. So there are 2 ridiculously awesome possibilities for the Buffalo Bills to hire should they decide to go that route. And honestly, and again, my knowledge of special teams coordinators is limited. There was a point where I was searching college guys. I have 2 college names that I can run by you if you really want to the point where I'm like, if it's not one of these 2 dudes, I'm probably gonna be pretty upset.
Yeah, I mean, I Tabor feels like a more. If I was like going to be an odds maker, I would say he would be more odds on that he would get hired than Kotwika, but I actually maybe prefer Kotwika.
That Panthers connection, huh?
Yeah, I mean, and just like you can't like at some point you just have to take that into account. But like this is the nice thing, I guess, about where the Bills are right now with the coaching situation, right? They didn't lose either coordinator to head coaching gigs. Their major quote coaching change is going to be at the special teams coordinator position, and there just happens to be a couple really good names out there. So a pretty good situation if you're the Bills, kind of to reload and go back into 2025 with your main staff intact outside of special teams. That is a bonus, and the fact that there are some good coaches available also a bonus in this situation.
The Buffalo Bills made 2 new hires. The first being Ryan Nielsen as senior defensive assistant. Nielsen was the Jags defensive coordinator last year, Falcons defensive coordinator the year previous, and spent half a decade as the Saints defensive line coach before that. Bobby Babich mentioned him in the preseason as someone who was a sounding board, a friend, somebody who talked to, someone he ran game plans, etc. by. He would call for advice and to talk shop. So that personal connection probably brought Nielsen to Buffalo when, by all accounts, he had half a dozen offers to go elsewhere. He chose to come to Buffalo. So that's a pretty big name hire for the Buffalo Bills defense to add him as a senior defensive assistant. And they also added Mike Pellegrino, likely as the new nickel corners coach now that Booker has gone to New England. But I mean, we could hear in the next couple of days, maybe Jamil Adai is on the outs going back to college, but that's not confirmed. So right now, the assumption is Pellegrino is probably going to come in as the new nickel cornerbacks coach. He is a former college lacrosse player at Johns Hopkins. All right, so he's got some Chris Hogan vibes there. Typical New England guy. Spent the past 10 years in New England under Bill Belichick, the last 6 as cornerbacks coach, and obviously 1 year under Gerard Mayo as well. The thing that both of these guys have in common, history of man coverage usage. The Buffalo Bills, I think, are still going to be a primary zone coverage team, but we saw them go more man this year. The Buffalo Bills are probably going to want to have a change up. They're probably going to want to have it for certain matchups. They're probably going to want to have it for some high leverage situations to throw a curveball at teams. And when they wanted to use it this year, quite frankly, it just really wasn't all that good for them. So between personnel changes in the coaching staff and maybe some personnel changes on the football field in the secondary, we could see a Buffalo Bills defense that utilizes man coverage more next season.
Yeah, and I don't think it's like you said. I don't think it's going to be like a wholesale change, right, to the scheme. Like that's not going to be the case. But I do think flexibility in the scheme is important, right, and be able to adapt to opponents, be able to adapt to your roster as far as maybe injuries are concerned, et cetera, right, is going to give you a better chance to be successful, like you said, in some of these high leverage situations. And like I saw people online talking about like, oh, this is good for Kaiir Elam. Like, look, all I don't want to be the negative one here, but like that, I think that ship has sailed, right? Like, I don't think Kaiir Elam, whatever, like maybe he gets traded, maybe he doesn't, but I just don't see, like, he's not going to be here beyond 2025. Okay. At the latest. And like, I could be wrong. Like maybe something happens, but I just like, I wouldn't read into it too much from that standpoint. Maybe it means he sticks around a bit more, but I also think like people probably buy into like, oh, he was a man coverage corner and like are still clinging to that a bit. It's also possible he's just not very good as a pro. So look, and I love the person, but it just hasn't been a good fit here, regardless of what the Bills may have tried at different times. So I do love these hires. Maybe also an indication that the Bills will potentially target a guy like Trey Hendrickson in a trade with the history there. There's a connection there. I mean, drawing a few connections here and like,
another free agent too, a guy that the Bills were rumored to be targeting at the trade deadline. Andre Sisco is a free agent. He was coached by Nielsen last year in Jacksonville. So that was another name that I was going to throw out there when we got into free agency. But Bills Are Electric comes in and says, curious how Ryan Nielsen will fit in between Bobby Babich and our D-line coach, Marcus West. Like, could we possibly have found our defensive line version of Aaron Cromer? Obviously, he's not the defensive line coach. He's a senior defensive assistant, but maybe he's here to babysit or look over the shoulder of defensive line coach Marcus West. You mentioned the connection. In New Orleans, he coached Trey Hendrickson. So there's that connection to Hendrickson there, who's in a contract dispute with the Cincinnati Bengals right now. He could possibly be on the trade block this offseason. The Bengals trading a player to the Buffalo Bills, I don't know, but maybe not so easy to believe. But at the same time, Hendrickson, and there was an article that came out in the Ringer about Hendrickson this week, and our guy Merck on Twitter shared this article, or at least the snippet from it. And in the article with the Ringer, Trey Hendrickson mentioned Ryan Nielsen as a guy who helped him early on in his career when he was struggling. And it was Ryan Nielsen who realized the issue with Trey Hendrickson was his body composition, and he helped him change his body composition. And then it all clicked for him as a football player. So outside of Hendrickson notably being on the trade block, Nielsen was a guy who got the most out of and helped Hendrickson reach his ceiling. Those Saints defensive lines always used to get after it back in the day during his tenure. if you are a Bills fan, maybe you're excited with what he can do with Ed Oliver, what he can do with Gregory Rousseau, what he can do with some guys that we draft. So maybe Ryan Nielsen can come in here and be our defensive line whisperer the way that Aaron Cromer was our offensive line whisperer.
I mean, we could certainly use a whisperer, right? In the absence of dudes, right? And in the absence of player and personnel, major player and personnel changes, you got to try something, right? You have some kind of whisperer, right? And so I'm hoping what this means is a combination of new coach and some new personnel, maybe some slight philosophical changes, maybe some slight archetype changes in the type of player they might look at after. AJ Trey Hendrickson to me is like a beefed up AJ Epinesa, obviously with a ton more sack production, and like maybe it helps a guy like AJ Epinesa as well. So look, I'm all for it, but you still got to add, I think, some personnel to this mix. And if that combination can kind of play itself out, then maybe you have an ability to kind of turn this thing around in 1 year.
All right, let's take a quick turn here because in a couple of weeks, it'll be a new league year. And when the new league year starts, so does NFL free agency. So we're just starting to dip our toes into the water, and we're going to do a little quick look at free agency here this evening. And I'll tell you what, just off the top, I am not impressed with this free agency crop. I have maybe like 10 guys that I even want to talk about tonight that could change, of course, as the offseason progresses and new names are added to this list as they are released. But what are your initial thoughts when you went through Spot Track or you went through whatever outlet you did just to see? I know I used Mike Clay's cheat sheet. I had it pulled up, that graphic pulled up on my Twitter as I was doing research for the show. I am just not impressed with this free agency class. What about you?
I'm not overly impressed, and it does kind of conversely make me happy that the Bills do have 2 second-round picks this year, and outside of a trade, like, it's good that they do have these early round picks because I'm not loving the free agent class. Now, I will say one thing that people are going to be talking about is like, okay, their cap situation, it's still not great, by the way, their cap situation, right? They're still effectively 11, whether you Spot Track or over the cap, they're still effectively 11 to $14 million under a projected new salary cap of $275 million. So there's going to have to be some moves made, some restructuring, some cuts. Maybe that means Von Miller's cut. And if Von Miller is cut, then all of a sudden you have some pretty big holes at defensive end. Do they bring a guy like Dwayne Smoot back on another like $2.5 million deal? A guy like Derek Barnett for the Texans is interesting to me. He played on a $2 million contract this year. Spot Track, and again, take their values for the grain of salt because they're usually kind of off, has him projected somewhere in the $5 million AAV range, $5 to $7 million AAV range, which I think is going to be higher than that. I think he's going to be closer to 10, but that would be a guy I'd potentially be interested in at maybe a $5 to $7 million a year range. Derek Barnett, who played really pretty well with the Texans this year. Not a lot of guys, though, right, at other positions. I mean, you have some – I saw you had some pretty good names listed at corner. But outside of, like, Travarius Ward, a Sebastian Joseph Day on the interior who we talked about last year and who Eric did a piece on last year, there's not a ton of guys out there that are really getting my juices flowing right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Buffalo Bills need a wide receiver. We hope, right, that Matt Collins is brought back. And then it's like, well, what do we do? Do we bring Amari Cooper back? Do we draft a guy? Do we go out and sign someone else to sort of fill that role? And we've sort of talked about the archetype we'd like for that position, a boundary separator. Not a lot of names. I mean, the name that I have highlighted is Darius Slayton. I think he is a boundary separator. I think he's always had bad quarterback play in New York. Does he have some drop issues? 2 of the last 3 seasons he has had some issues, but he's a guy who could take the top off of a defense. Maybe a different situation with a quarterback that has a pulse. Might be something that is intriguing. I don't know how much money he's going to garner on the open market. He's still rather young, late 20s, 4.4 speed out of Auburn. Tutu Atwell is a guy I know Eric did some work on in the film room, and you can catch that over at cover1.net. Look at some of his breakdown of Tutu Atwell. This is like a Tez Johnson type, less than 160 pounds. DeMarcus Robinson from LA is another really interesting guy. boundary
we've
guy.
had him on our free agent show probably feel like for 3 or 4 years now.
But then, like, after those three guys, it's like Hollywood Brown didn't really make much of an impact in Kansas City, of all places. Injuries are always a huge concern for him. Brandon Cooks looks cooked just the way he played in Dallas last year. DJ Chark, I mean, how much different is he than Marquez Valdez-Scantling? And then, like, dude, I put Amir Smith Marsetti down as maybe like a flyer that they take. I know they brought him in for a pre-draft visit years ago. He's got some return flex. He's got some speed out of Iowa, but the receiver position is lacking. Then you go to edge rusher. You mentioned Derek Barnett. Josh Sweat is probably like the big prize, but the Buffalo Bills are probably not going to afford that. You have some older players with some red flags. Khalil Mack, do you really want to pay that guy when he's getting up there in age? Maybe only has like 1 year left. Like, that's just another Von Miller type of thing. Chase Young, you always worry about the injuries with Chase Young. Demarcus Lawrence missed a whole year with a foot injury. His production hasn't been really all that great in 2 seasons. You have some younger guys maybe with some potential that hasn't been met. Guys we've talked about in the pre-draft process before, like Joe Tryon, Peyton Turner, Azeez Ojulari. You have some rotational guys like Josh Uche, Malcolm Kuntz, Michael Hecht, but like just nothing crazy at edge rusher. To me, I feel like the Buffalo Bills are. At first, I was like, well, I really want the Bills to draft an interior guy. I really want the Bills to draft a corner. I'm sort of now walking back the Buffalo Bills drafting a wide receiver just because I'm really not in love with this class. And I'm just like, man, those first 3 picks, I'd really like to get an edge rusher. And I'm going to have to really do a deeper dive on some of these edge rushers this year because I can't imagine the Bills spending the money, and I can't imagine the money being worth it on a lot of these guys.
Yeah, and I think there's a real chance that there's conversations happening right now for Von Miller to take another pay cut because I look, they can save all that money this year, right? No dead cap into 2026 if they cut him. If they cut him now, essentially, if they cut him before June 1st, they get all the dead cap relief. They only get about $8 million in real cap relief in 2025. But I think there's a real chance maybe that Von Miller is still with his team in 2025. And then in 2026 is maybe when they cut the cord on him because like if you cut Von Miller and Dwayne Smoot's gone, I mean, you're going into this season essentially with Javon Solomon, Greg Rousseau, and AJ Epinesa outside of someone that you might draft. Now they may wait to see, right, what they do in the draft before they make a decision, and in which case maybe they do end up cutting him post June 1st. But I think that would be a shock. I think if anything, they would probably either keep him or cut him before that. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate the idea of Tutu Atwell at wide receiver. I think that when he's been given a few opportunities in LA with Matthew Stafford, I think he's looked pretty decent. But again, you're talking about that's a guy that's maybe like a $3 to $4 million a year player, if that, and it's not really moving the needle a ton. So the impact players are likely going to be coming from a trade or in the draft.
Yeah.
So this is an especially important year for being to hit on those early draft picks.
And Chudley comes in and says, you have to be willing to move on from players who are not good and are expensive. I don't disagree with you, but like you're not saving any money with Von Miller until after June 1st. So any money that you save releasing Von Miller, that's $17.5 million, you can't spend it until June 1st. So the only logical thing I can think of is we make a trade for somebody and then don't extend them until after June 1st, or we make a trade for somebody after June 1st. But like, what's the appetite going to be for Myles Garrett to be traded after June 1st? What's the appetite for Trey Hendrickson to be traded after June? Like, I just don't see it. Right. So yeah, that June 1st designation is awesome. But at the same time, we don't see that money until June 1st and free agency's over. So,
and you still,
that's what makes it tough.
Well, and you're not somehow like you're saving the money in 2025. You then push that dead cap hit into 2026 if you do that. So you're not really like you're only doing that in the rare situation where something is available to you after June 1st. Otherwise, you're just outright cutting him or you're keeping him in 2025. There's no other reason really that I can see why you would make that move after June 1st unless there was some trade or some reason to do that.
Looking on the interior is tough as well because guess what's another contract that we're stuck with? Daquan Jones. Like, there's no getting out of that Daquan Jones deal for another season. So guys like Milton Williams, I don't think the Buffalo Bills are going to go pay for a guy like Milton Williams when they have to pay Daquan Jones. They're stuck with that contract. DJ Jones, I really loved him as a run stuffer. I think he's going to get a lot of money because that Denver defense was awesome this year. So that might be a pipe dream. Those are two interior defenders that I think should be on the Buffalo Bills radar, but theoretically probably don't make sense. But some veteran guys that maybe do: Sebastian Joseph Day, Tierre Tart, Jeremiah Ledbetter. To me, the name I had highlighted is Sebastian Joseph Day, a guy I wanted on this Buffalo Bills team for a while. Joseph Day, Daquan Jones, hopefully he pops back next year. Ed Oliver, Dwayne Carter, hopefully he pops and grows next year. And draft a guy and just have a 5-man rotation there at defensive tackle and just hope it's a hell of a lot better than what it was this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And you could maybe see them like maybe they bring back Austin John. Like, I don't know, right? What are they going to do?
Please don't do it.
I know. I'm just saying, like, they're going to have to fill the roster somehow, right? And I think like you're going to go into the season, you're probably not going to be cutting Daquan Jones because I think it's like what, $9 million dead cap and only like $1 million in savings or something if you cut him. So he's going to be back to play out that last year of his deal. Ed Oliver and Dwayne Carter. I mean, that's your core three, right? So you need an influx of talent on the interior and you need an influx of talent on the edge. And like, man, it's tough to have to say that every single year. I mean, we don't know, right? Javon Solomon, maybe he develops and he becomes sort of a Von Miller protege of sorts, but like I would be very surprised if all of a sudden Javon Solomon becomes like your number one pass rusher on this team in 2025.
James Emmon comes in and says, how do retirements affect the dead cap situation? Unfortunately, you eat all of it. Any money that's guaranteed, you eat it on your salary cap. You pay the guy the money, you guarantee the money, whether he retires, whether he's injured, no matter what, you eat that money. So a guy like Von Miller retiring, you'd still be eating all of that money on his contract. Looking at the cornerback position, because Rasul Douglas is a free agent, Kyrie Elam, we all think he's probably going to be traded this offseason. The Bills are probably going to use a high draft pick on a corner, whether it's the first or the second round, but they're going to want to have a veteran presence there. What does that veteran presence look like? Obviously, if the Buffalo Bills are looking to spend some money, a guy like DJ Reed is super interesting. If the Bills are looking to spend some money, two guys that I know you were really high on, both coming off of injuries, but are rather young players going into their 5th year, coming off the 4th year of their contracts. Paulson Adebo from New Orleans, who you loved in the pre-draft process a couple of years ago, and Asante Samuel Jr., who we both loved, coming off of a stinger issue, barely played last year. So maybe their injuries lower their value a little bit. Maybe the Buffalo Bills can get a younger boundary corner across from Christian Benford for a decent price tag, but probably not. Guys like DJ Reed, Paulson Adebo, Asante Samuel Jr., going to cost you some money. You have options. Akilo Witherspoon could be a stopgap option. Eric Stokes could be maybe he works better here than he did in Green Bay, former first-round pick type option. Maybe you're pretty confident that whoever you draft can start and you just need a body, and maybe you go calling Trey White to see if Trey White wants to come back. There's some options. The one that sticks out the most to me is Shavarius Ward. Had a rough year in San Francisco for a number of reasons. One tragic, his daughter passed away. Kind of a forgotten about guy, I think, maybe in this free agent class, looking to win, maybe. Still under the age of 30. Maybe you can get Shavarius Ward in here on like a 1-year prove it deal or a 2-year deal, so you don't have to give him too much term and lock him up after the age of 30. If you're looking to do a little bit more man stuff, if you're looking for a stud or a bona fide guy, who knows if he's a stud anymore, but like a bona fide guy across from Christian Benford, the name that sticks out the most to me, Shavarius Ward.
Yeah, I like Shavarius Ward. I think he's still going to cost you north of $10 million per year. I think DJ Reed is a name a lot of people like. I think this is your opportunity if you're Brendan Bean to kind of look at the draft board and determine like what do you feel about the defensive line class, edge and defensive tackle versus what do you feel about the cornerback class, right? Because if you feel really good about the defensive line, class, whether that's at the edge or at tackle, you may be willing to go out and give a cornerback $10 million to kind of shore up that opposite spot across from Christian Benford for 2025 and then just go ham on the defensive line in the draft. Now,
Yeah.
you never want to pigeonhole yourself into taking a specific position in the draft, and that might be
It's
the
so
holdup.
loaded, though. It's so loaded, though.
It is, but you also, again, don't have a ton of cap room right now to work with. You're still negative in the cap, depending on sort of, again, what happens with some restructuring, extensions, and what have you. But there might be one type of signing like that the Bills have in their holster once the salary cap stuff's worked out for this year. And I do think, based on sort of the names available, that the best bang for your buck is going to either be going after a guy like a Sebastian Joseph Day or potentially going after a corner like Javarius Ward, where it's not the top guy on the market, but still a guy that you can feel comfortably penciling in as a starter and then going into the draft with options.
Nikki G comes in and says, look what 2 new safeties did to Douglas this year. He didn't trust his safeties at all. Don't really blame him. And that's the other sort of position of need. If you're the Buffalo Bills, you're likely going to go into 2025 starting Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop. Taylor Rapp is a guy you paid who played well, and Cole Bishop is a guy you drafted high. But behind that, like DeMar Hamlin's probably going to leave in free agency, or he might come back. But if you're the Buffalo Bills, it might just be best to move on from DeMar and look for some higher upside at that backup position, not somebody who just started for a full year over the guy you're hoping is going to be your starter in 2025 in Cole Bishop. The name that I wish the Buffalo Bills could go chase is Javon Holland. I wish the Buffalo Bills had that kind of money to go out there and add that impact player in the middle of their defense. Everyone knows how high I was on him the year Gregory Rousseau was drafted. I wanted him with that pick that we took Gregory Rousseau. So Javon Holland is the name that's out there. Andre Cisco, we mentioned earlier in the show, the Ryan Nielsen connection. He should garner a pretty penny. I can't imagine the Buffalo Bills being in the Andre Cisco market, because what they're likely looking for is just, they're looking for this year's iteration of Mike Edwards. Like, they are looking for someone to come in, and if Taylor Rapp or Cole Bishop gets hurt, they can play in a game and not embarrass themselves. So some names that I have on my list here: Xavier Woods from Carolina, Elijah Molden from the LA Chargers, the corner converted to safety. Was really high on him in the draft a couple of years ago. He did break his fibula in December, though, so there's some injury things that we have to deal with him. Ashton Davis, who we talked about last year, the athletic, former second-round pick from the Jets, who's just never really gotten to see the field in New York. Ryan Neal, who we feel like we've talked about for years, the Bucs safety. Richie Grant, the former high draft pick who didn't really work out in Atlanta. Who knows? Maybe you can convince Mike Edwards to come back round 2. He did praise Josh Allen and called him the MVP on Instagram. So maybe some bridges could be mended with Mike Edwards to get Mike Edwards back here as the third safety. But the name I have highlighted is Marcus Epps of the Las Vegas Raiders, a guy that we talked about a ton. What was it, last year, 2 years ago? When looking to replace Jordan, I think it was 2 years ago, when looking to replace Jordan Poyer. Signed a big money deal in Las Vegas. Wasn't as good as he was in Philadelphia, but get him on the cheap, come in here to be a third safety. Maybe he has to play. Maybe he can contribute. Marcus Epps was the name that really stuck out to me on that safety list.
I like Epps. I like Davis. Like you said, we talked about him last year. You can go back and watch. Eric did a really good on Joseph Day and Ashton Davis, by the way. Both guys did a free agent sort of deep dive on both of those guys a year ago. And a lot of those things will still ring true again for this year. Yeah, so I think I would be on board with that. This is an interesting conversation because we all just assume DeMar Hamlin's gone, that they're not going to bring him back. And with the limited resources, do the Bills say, okay, we're not going to bring DeMar Hamlin back, but instead we're going to go out into the market and sign a free agent safety? I'm not so sure about that. So, but you start adding this up and you start really seeing how many holes, not just at some starter positions like at corner, but some depth issues as well. Now it's safety, some depth issues at the interior of the defensive line, etc. So this is going to be a very interesting free agency to see where Bean sort of attacks, because like we're not going to cover all these positions off in free agency. A lot of this is going to have to come through the draft. So it'll be really interesting to see what he actually does do in free agency. I wouldn't mind bringing in a guy like Marcus Epps because I think he's not going to be more than $2-3 million a year, if that. Maybe bring him in on kind of like that a 1 or 2 year deal to kind of have that third guy, but that seems a bit like a luxury. But you never know, right? Because of the injuries that happened, Taylor Rapp finding himself getting himself injured a lot. You like to have 3 guys available, and it was nice that the Bills did have 3 guys available with Rapp, Bishop, obviously, and Hamlin. And I think they do want to have 3 guys. So to me, having 3 safeties, it's important, but it might be a luxury in free agency. They might have to go bargain bin shopping there.
All right, before we head out of here this evening, a couple of final thoughts. Number one, didn't get a chance to talk about it on this show, but Micah Hyde officially announced his retirement last week. Retired as a Buffalo Bill. Just a invaluable part of this Buffalo Bill. I mean, some of my favorite Buffalo Bills memories that I will remember to the day I die, that 2017 video in the locker room, man, where it was him and Poyer and Kyle Williams and just what they did for this football team in 2017 and where they brought this team in the prime of their careers. I know it didn't end for either guy, both Poyer and Hyde, the way they wanted it to in Buffalo. And for him to come back here and to swallow his pride and be a practice squad player just because he wanted to be around the guys and he just wanted to experience with this with them and be there with them. His interception against the Patriots in the wild card round against Mac Jones, just everything about Micah Hyde, even though he's not from Buffalo, embodies what it means to be a Buffalonian. He will probably be throwing his celebrity softball tournament in Buffalo for years and years and years and years and years to come. So shout out to Micah Hyde. What an awesome career. Wish it could have ended differently for him here in Buffalo with a Super Bowl title.
Awesome career, and really we were spoiled with both him and Poyer for all those years. He was really the first big free agent signing that was made in the McDermott sort of Bean era, when they got him from Green Bay as a guy that they came in and gave a chance to have a starting role after he was sort of a rotational player there. Pete says that Hyde INT is my favorite moment of the game ever, and it was spectacular because it really just changed the entire complexion of that game. Patriots had no momentum from that point forward, but yeah, I mean, he'll be a Wall of Fame type of guy for sure. Wouldn't surprise me if maybe next year he's one of the legends of the game when the Bills hopefully are in the playoffs again and having a guy firing them up. But man, yeah, hats off to Micah Hyde, great career. And hopefully in some capacity, even when the Bills do win a Super Bowl, he's around the team closely for it.
Another sad piece of information that broke late last week. Former Buffalo Bills head coach Dick Duran passed away at the age of 74 from cancer. And that's another tough one, man. Cancer sucks, dude. Like it does. And I know that Dick Duran never had the success in Buffalo that a lot of people would have hoped, obviously, as we were in the midst of that playoff drought. I know he was the butt of a lot of people's jokes because he was a very old school, fundamentally sound, like fired Turk Schoner because the playbook was too big type of, there's too much motion. It confused him, right? Type of coach. But at the end of the day, just a world-class human being. He had a great career in Chicago. Those Buffalo Bills rosters weren't good, and he still managed to go 7-9, 3 straight seasons. He was never able to get the Buffalo Bills over the top and have the success that he wanted, obviously. But my first season as a season ticket holder was Dick Duran's first season as Buffalo Bills head coach. And, I was a young Bills fan. I was excited to go to the games. And I will say this, again, he did not have the success that I'm sure he wanted, that the fans wanted, etc., as head coach of the Buffalo Bills, but he did just enough, man, to hook this dude right here for life as a Buffalo Bills fan, to experience what I experienced in that stadium, to watch that football team that he put on the field, do just enough to be just entertaining enough to hook me for life. So thank you to Dick Duran. Thoughts are with his family. Rest in peace, coach.
Rest in peace. For sure. Thoughts to his family. I think that he he kept that team competitive, and some of those rosters were not very good. I'll never forget some of those games, like the Washington game where won on a game-winning field goal because Washington had that unsportsmanlike penalty for calling 2 timeouts in a row. That was during the Duran era. And I think where he is now, he's not 7-9, he's 9-7, and that team's making the playoffs.
Another piece of news, Chudley comes in and says, trainer Danny Kellington, obviously the one who was so instrumental in bringing DeMar Hamlin back to life on the field. He's leaving Buffalo to become the head of the training department, the medical department. I don't know the exact title there in Carolina. So the Buffalo to Carolina pipeline is strong as Danny Kellington heads there. So kudos to him and good luck to him on his endeavors there in Carolina. Dan Morgan stole a good one in Danny Kellington. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you. We went a little longer. We always end up going a little longer in the off season than we do in the regular season, just because we like talking off season stuff so much. Got a ton of stuff to talk about still. A couple of weeks from now, we have the NFL Combine coming up. Then we have free agency, and we have all of our deep dives into different position groups in the draft. And we'll be making our draft boards and which guys we expect to take in the first round, the second round, the third round, etc. All that good stuff that we do in the off season still coming up. So please, as we begged of you on the last post-game show after the Chiefs game, stick with us. We think it'll be worth your time here. I know a lot of people check out in the offseason, but I think we do some pretty awesome stuff here at the Air Raid Hour. So stay tuned, stay with us. If you're looking to support the show, there are 3 things that you can do. Number 1, you can smash that like button. It helps us with the algorithm. Number 2, you can click that share button and share on any of your socials or text a friend. Anyone you'd think would like to hear us rant about the Buffalo Bills defense for the first 45 minutes of this show, share that with them. And then the last thing you can do is once the show is done being live, once we're done being live, if you could leave a comment in the comment section, a take, a criticism, a compliment, a go Bills, a cheers, whatever. Once the show is done live, if you leave a comment to the video on demand, helps us with the algorithm as well. And we always make it a point to go in and respond to you guys as well. I know RJ comes in and says, are you guys still doing weekly shows? Every Monday at 9 p.m. We won't have the 2 shows like we did last year. As we get closer to the draft and as we get like tight on time, I know we have a couple of pre-recorded Thursday shows that we're going to throw in there just because there's so much to talk about and so little time. And we don't want to be talking people's ears off for 3 hours every night. We want to try to keep these shows between, an hour and an hour 30. So there might be a couple of pre-recorded Thursday night shows, but we'll be live every Monday at 9 p.m. and we'll be live for all 3 nights of the draft here at Cover One.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that again, coordinating that coverage again for this year with Cover One. Eric trusts me to do that, and it's not a job I take lightly. I'll try to up my game again, see what I can do for this year. But yeah, we still got about 2.5 months until that, so got a little bit of time.
All right, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you, and until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!